Well,
Because I
everyone's here. We're gonna
NCPRD meeting.
go ahead
I
and
won't
get
be able to be
started.
there.
Well, I'm frustrated that he was pepper sprayed the day before.
Well, first off,
Somehow.
wanted to make some comments about what happened this weekend. We are shocked and saddened by the vicious and tragic attacks on Friday that left 2 courageous Portland area residents dead and another seriously injured. We share the community's horror and grief. One of those who lost their life was Rick Best. He lived in Clackamas County and actually ran for Clackamas County Commission. Mr. Best was taking the MAX train to his home in Happy Valley when the incident occurred. He was an Army veteran who served our country for more than 2 decades. These men were heroes who simply stood up to defend 2 young women being confronted with hate speech. We should all hope to be so brave when faced with similar situation. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence. I'd also like to take this opportunity to reiterate that Clackamas County has a mental health emergency crisis line for anyone in need of help. That number is 503-655-8585, and again, that's 503-655-8585, and we're here to help. Thanks. Well, we'll call to order the Budget Committee on May 30th, 2017. And invite the Budget Committee members and staff to introduce yourself. We'll start down there.
Diane Padilla, Budget Manager.
Don Krupp, County Administrator. Laurel Buttman, our Deputy County Administrator, is on her way. She's caught in traffic. So
I can relate.
Sonia Fisher, County Commissioner.
Tom Feely, citizen member.
Paul Savas, County Commissioner.
Wilda Park, citizen member.
Jim Bernard, Clackamas County Chair.
Jeff Caton, citizen member.
Martha Schrader, County Commissioner.
Eric Hofeld, citizen member, and before we get started, I would like to suggest that we salute the flag.
Ken Humberston, County Commissioner.
Ed Mura, citizen member.
Roxanne Fisher, Budget Coordinator. Jian Zhang, Budget Coordinator.
Please join me in a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the record, the committee is convened in the following dates and times. 8:30 a.m. Wednesday, May 31st, and again at 5:30 for public testimony. 8:30 a.m. Thursday, June 1st, and 8:30 a.m. Tuesday, June 6th. Should the committee determine that it needs additional time, the following dates have been reserved. Wednesday, June 7th, and Thursday, June 8th. I'd like to call for nominations for the chair of the Budget Committee.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Jeff Caton for chair.
Second.
I'd like to nominate Wilda Parks for chair.
I'd second that.
Okay, so man, I've got 2 people up.
Wow.
Speeches? So how do you want to do this?
Yeah.
Let's, you want to just vote by raising our hands?
Or I just want, I nominated Jeff, and I'd just like to just speak to why. Number one, he's our longest standing citizen budget committee member. And I think that's, he's been through several of these, five, 6 of these at least. So I think he knows it well, and his background kind of supports that. I love my colleague, Wilda Parks, and have a tremendous amount of respect for her. I'm not just saying that. We've known each other a long time, so I really admire and respect Wilda. The other thing that for those of you who remember, I had this argument, seemed to be, or disagreement with the chair at times, because the chair wanted, Chair Ludlow thought that the chair should be himself or the elected member. I don't think that, in my 20 years of doing budgets, I don't think that, an elected official, it should be really a citizen member. And I was one of the people that originally voted and interviewed Wilda to put her on the budget committee, and I think she's done a great job, and I really appreciate that. But since that, she's had the honor of being the mayor of Milwaukee, and now she has the honor of it as a city councilor. And so I think, I don't think today or in the future that we would probably. I'll just leave that. I'll just leave it there. I mean, I'll just say that I really think that the structure of the law is such that Oregon budget law, that you have 5 citizen members and 5 of the elected body, and I think that's important.
So I guess I'll speak on the behalf of Wilda. I've known Wilda, when did you come here?
1998.
So around 1998. And I'm kind of a person who's, running this kind of process isn't about the dollars, it's about the process. And efficiency for me is really important, as you may have remembered in our recent test, that moving through the process efficiently, and Wilda has literally run thousands of meetings, literally. As being an executive director of the chamber, and as mayor, and as a city councilor, and all the other events I've been to, it's all about efficiency. Jeff's skills as a CPA, a budget officer, is outstanding. I appreciated having an introduction to what people's backgrounds were, because county commissioners are generalists, and the backgrounds at this table are tremendous. So I guess we'll do by raising hands. The members of the budget committee are all here. So
Can I say a couple of words real quick, and Wilda could too if she'd like to. And I would like to say thank you for the nomination. I'd be glad to serve if it voted, and I have the greatest amount of respect for Wilda, and I appreciate her service in the community over the years. And my background includes leading a number of meetings over the years in the business community, keeping agendas on track. And I appreciate what you're saying about making sure we do have an efficient budget committee cycle where we stay on task. We make sure our questions are addressed, but we do have a tight schedule. We need to be mindful of that. And as we go through the budget cycle with a number of departments speaking to their agendas and their budgets and how they're addressing their needs. So I want to just thank you for the nomination and be glad to serve if so chosen.
Well, there's not really a lot that I'd like to particularly add. I certainly share the thoughts of everyone who's spoken so far. I think all of the members, all of the citizen members and the county commission members of the budget committee are smart. They understand financials, and certainly some of them understand it far, far more than me. I do understand running meetings, and I do understand keeping things on track, and I do understand helping to make sure that everything facilitates well and doesn't get bogged down into the weeds. And I'd be honored to serve if I were chosen as the chair of this committee. It would be a great honor to do that. Thank you.
okay, so by a raise of hands, somebody count over there, because I can't see everybody. So Jeff Caton, raise your hand. Voting for Jeff. Looks like 5.
See this?
Wilda Parks. Let me see.
Well, Jeff, it's time for us to go out in the parking lot and duke it out.
wanna-
Well, I'm not sure if dueling is appropriate in this time, day and age, but I don't know if we could co-chair or somehow work out some kind of an arrangement or come to some kind of a
Mr. Chairman?
approach.
May I offer a suggestion?
Sure.
We had a similar situation occur with the water board organization in Portland, where two of us wanted the same job. We flipped a coin. It worked out fine. So my suggestion is flip a coin and let's move forward.
Isn't
Why
that how
not?
Portland got named?
Yes, it is. It was
Okay.
tradition.
So who has a coin?
Oh, yeah, I
And a quarter.
I know.
Heads and a tail.
Don't tell me nobody has any money.
The audience have a
We
coin.
have a debit card.
Between 1 and 10.
Can we flip a dollar bill?
We can flip a debit card or a dollar bill.
Oh, my goodness.
Wait, don't go far. I don't want to have to pay interest. Heads or tails?
Heads.
Tails it is. So
I'm a chair.
you're the
isn't it?
chair.
All right.
Well, fair
Thanks.
enough. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for the nomination. Thank you.
Okay, then.
Oh, wait, so I'm gonna turn the gavel over to you, which we don't have today. We'll get it for you tomorrow.
Okay, well, thank you for the honor of serving as your budget chair this year. I'd like to now, as the next call of business is to call for nominations for secretary.
I nominate Wilda Parks.
Hey, I've been doing that anyhow.
I'll se-
Second.
Okay, there
I
we
like
go.
it. There's not a lot of work to it. No, I'm only kidding.
Move the nominations be closed.
Second.
Hearing no other nominations, we want to call for official vote. All in favor of Welda?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Hearing none.
Congratulations.
Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, at this time, the next call of business is to invite County Administrator Don Krupp to deliver a budget message to
Well,
the
thank
committee and
you,
community. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and good morning, all. I should let you know that this year, we are actually videotaping the budget deliberations. You know, in past years, we've simply audio taped, but we've got this room now set up to be able to do videotaping. And so we're going to be videotaping the whole session and making that available online to the public.
How's my hair?
So,
Like always, not that.
So anyway, I first of all, I want to thank you all for making the commitment to participate in this annual enterprise of developing and taking action on a budget for the citizens of Clackamas County. It's an arduous task. We've got multiple days ahead of us of one presentation after another, lots of detailed information, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions and lots of answers provided here over the course of the next week or so, possibly going into next week, depending on what your needs are for presentation time and following up on questions and answers. But I am pleased to present to you a balanced and what I believe to be a responsible budget for fiscal year 2017-2018. It directs our limited public resources to carry out and advance the county's key strategic goals of building trust through good government, growing a vibrant economy, building a strong infrastructure, ensuring safe, healthy, and secure communities, and honoring, utilizing, promoting, and investing in our natural resources. It has been built with the cumulative effort of some 2,000 plus members of our county workforce who, at our core, value service, professionalism, integrity, respect, individual accountability, and trust. Those are our core values. As I shared with you last week, the county's budget exceeds a significant milestone. It stands at $1.15 billion. This is the first time in the county's history that the budget as proposed exceeds $1 billion. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, it will be reviewed and examined by 10 different budget committees comprised of some 50 total citizens. This specific budget committee, you carry the largest load, and your responsibility will be for reviewing, listening, asking questions, and then deliberating on 70% of what that $1.15 billion budget represents, or about $781 million. So every year I provide in my budget message some general statistics to help paint a picture of the county's economic health. And I can summarize that simply by saying that we are in a generally positive condition, yet we do know that we face certain challenges ahead. Unemployment in Clackamas County is standing at about 3.5%, which is slightly better than the 4% that representing the state of Oregon, and better than the 4.5% representing the country as a whole. And since the recession, median home prices have increased to about $363,000 over the course of the past 4 years. That means the median price of a home in Clackamas County has increased about $100,000. Property tax has been steady here these past 4 years, and this coming year projected at a rate of 4.75% increase over the previous year. Our indicators for poverty suggest that we have fewer households who rely on supplemental nutrition assistance. In fact, over the course of the past 4 years, there's been a 25% reduction in the number of households who have required that kind of assistance. And then in terms of temporary assistance to needy families over the course of the past 4 years, there has been a reduction of reliance by about 41%, although I will say this past year, there was a slight increase from the previous year of about 6.5% rise. But the net over the course of the past 4 years has been a 41% reduction, and that is a better performance than the state as a whole, which was about 36 to 37% reduction. So it means things are looking better. It doesn't mean that things are in perfect shape. There are lots of challenges ahead. With regard to key indicators in the budget, property tax revenues continue to grow at a steady pace. Our total personnel-related expenditures are up about $12.6 million, or 5%. Growth in the general fund is really running steady, and we are able, as a consequence, after accounting for maintenance level expenditures, to meet our reserve target of 10% of unrestricted revenues and our contingency budgeted at 5% of expenditures. I should make clear that with respect to reserves, it's budgeted not to be tampered with. It will remain there through the course of the year, and it's what we expect to be in reserves at the end of the year. With respect to contingencies, which is about $8.5 million, those contingency dollars can only be tapped or spent with the consideration and approval of the Board of County Commissioners during the course of the budget year. So our goal is that we end the year with both those reserves and contingency funds intact. Overall, the total workforce is slightly down from this current fiscal year to 2,049 FTEs. Some of the key issues that have affected the development of this year's coming budget include our continuing work to develop and to align our department's strategic business plans with the board's goals and its strategic plan and the budget. I will say that this continues to be a work in progress. As you reviewed the budget documents, you saw that we have been able to make some progress moving towards a program budget for those departments that have completed their strategic business plans, and we still have more work to do for that conversion in subsequent budget years. We have been taking some steps to strengthen our support in our human resources, technology services, and finance function to be able to support and try to accelerate that conversion here in the ensuing year. We will continue, as we always have, to pay close attention to the condition of the county's general fund, which for you all really offers the greatest opportunity for discretion for targeting key priorities. And we will continue as well to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our internal service delivery departments, particularly relying on technology as a means to achieve some of those. We've made some significant progress over the course of the past year in strengthening and centralizing our grants management responsibilities and rebuilding and strengthening our capacity with regard to procurement. We will continue to address the challenges presented by the Oregon PERS system on the county's resources, but I can tell you that with this current budget, we are in reasonably good shape for being able to respond to the financial challenges of the uncertainties related to PERS and its futures. We have also, in planning and putting together the projections for the general fund, factored in what we anticipate to be future impacts of the PERS system on the county resources, and those are plugged into our 5-year projections. Now, I have held back in this year's budget in proposing to you any new policy initiatives or major service enhancements, what we have referred to as policy level proposals. And that is, in fact, driven by the constraints placed upon us at maintaining maintenance level, particularly with meeting our PERS obligations. We have done just a few things, though, that I want to make sure I call your attention to that aren't being treated as policy level proposals, but they are changes to the budget that will in some way or fashion affect the general fund. One has to do with facilities maintenance, and we have added 3 FTEs to our facilities maintenance group. This is funded and supported by allocated costs. I made that choice after the review of the numbers showed that the change was actually had a de minimis effect on the allocated costs that we would charge to the departments for facilities overall. And as I think you've all heard, in last year and the year before, our facilities crews are operating at a level which is about half of what is needed for the scope and scale of the square footage of the facilities we're responsible for maintaining. There was also a change in public and governmental affairs. This has to do with how we manage the distribution of the cable revenues, which now are budgeted in public and governmental affairs, and it allowed us to create and establish a content management position in their budget to help with the overall work that we do on the county's website and our public information capabilities through that. I also have included in the budget, and you'll hear about this when County Council presents his budget, but we've set aside a small reserve of $50,000 to help to provide what I would call insurance or liability protection to our CPOs, our community planning organizations, from the risk of being subject to what they refer to as SLAP lawsuits. And that was in response to a request for help from our CPO leadership. I don't believe it's yet included in the budget numbers you have here, but I will also be adding during the course of our deliberations this week a restoration to the original $100,000 that was set aside for the Regional Arts and Culture Council's Arts Education Program budget. You've seen policy proposals from this come through here for the past couple of years. to restore from the current budget amount of 80,000 to 100,000 to restore it back to pre-recession levels. And that's something I've done as part of my budget package. And I've discussed that with the Board of County Commissioners in advance to let them know that it was going to be a part of my package. It's not following the normal policy level proposal routine, but I do think after 5 years after the recession that it's certainly reasonable to restore that to what was the maintenance level for that program. And there are other adjustments to the workforce and programs that are non-general fund related that you'll hear about from the various departments. So you'll see some changes in some of the FTE levels, some commitments, but those are principally funded by other types of fund sources and other means and mechanisms. My key recommendations for you for this coming year, first and foremost, you will receive a report from your compensation board for elected officials. And as I did the previous year and the year before that, this year I will be recommending that you approve the recommendation that they have provided to you, which is to adjust the salaries of 3 sets of elected officials. The assessor at 4%, the county commissioners at 5.95%, and the treasurer at 2.4%. You will hear me continue to ask that we move forward with these recommendations because these are driven by the same kind of analysis that we calculate salaries for our entire workforce in the county. And I am concerned that if we don't keep pace with the market rates for the salaries for these elected official positions, that they will fall further and further behind. You'll eventually end up with a situation where there is a large disparity and a need to make a large adjustment rather than a minor incremental adjustment. The PERS reserve, as I told you, the current budget accounts for and recognizes the impacts of the increased costs associated with the Oregon PERS system, and as does our 5-year projection for the general fund. We have factored in those future costs into our 5-year projections. Last year, you will recall, I proposed and you agreed to move $700,000 of what was budgeted in contingency in the general fund into a little fund we called the PERS reserve. This was money that had been essentially salted away to help mitigate the effects of the PERS costs. And so that increased that fund to about $2.7 million. It's really, in a way, kind of another general fund reserve, the way to think about it. But it's setting separately because we wanted to make sure we had some money to mitigate some of the effects of the changes. And I am proposing in my budget to you this year that we return $650,000 of that back into the general fund so that we meet our targets for reserves and contingencies. You will also hear from some departments when they give you their presentations to you that they have seen and experienced some fund depletion over the course of the past several years. Various reasons why. But I want to make sure you're aware of it. Not that we need to take action for this coming year's budget, but to prepare you for the fact that next year, I believe that these departments and offices will want to address those issues at that time. Over the course of the past year, we have worked closely with the Sheriff's Office in order to help build towards what would be a sustainable 5-year forecast. And I'm happy to report to you that we have managed to prepare for you a balanced budget for the Sheriff's Office. If you recall, about 6 to 8 months ago, when we did the expenditure and revenue projections for the Sheriff's funds, we were looking at a projected $6.5 million deficit. And through the good work of Laurel Buttman and Diane Padilla and Nancy Artman in the Sheriff's Office, they have managed to pull that together to bring it into balance. So I'm feeling good about that. I still believe we have more work to do in the future because while we look towards this year and the subsequent year, we still have issues there that we're going to want to attend to. So one of the things that you'll see, though, in this budget, and this is entirely new, you may recall that a few years ago, our audit committee had recommended that we reduce the total number of funds that the county manages. And we also, in looking at direction from GASB, thought it would be prudent and appropriate to merge what is the local option levy for sheriff's operations with the sheriff's operating fund into a single fund. We will still account for separately within the fund for the use of and the receipt of the local option levy, but this will allow us to make sure we continue to comply with GASB requirements. It will also provide us, I think, better capability and flexibility for managing towards the future with the sheriff's budget. It means it's a little more efficient, a lot less juggling between funds there that have been having to be accounted for separately, and I think we will significantly benefit from that. The alternative to this would be to have moved the sheriff's operating fund into the general fund and run it as a general fund department, and I think there is some significant liabilities to doing that. I prefer to be able to see the sheriff's fund operated as a separate independent fund. You will also learn and hear from our human resources staff more about what we're doing to stabilize our benefits administration, our new management to our human resources department and our benefits administration program have highlighted some critical needs there. The program has been drawing down on reserves because the rates for administration that we charge to departments really haven't kept up and haven't kept pace. They had remained the same for many, many years. You go back. We'll share a little bit more about that history for you a little later during the budget deliberations. But as a result, there's been a significant increase to the cost to departments for the administration costs to manage and administer our benefits program. And to meet our fiduciary responsibilities, I'm doing is designating $2.6 million of our general fund reserve as a guarantee, not to be used, it won't be used and can't be used, but to serve as the guarantor that the funds are there in reserve to support and bolster the program. In the meantime, our Human Resources Department has put together a plan to address the long-term issues over time and build what would be a separate independent reserve above and beyond and on top of what is the general fund reserve. The last item that I wanted to share with you in terms of a recommendation has to do with cost allocation, because you hear about this issue every year. You see significant changes that occur in the line items of department budgets. And of course, we do a cost allocation plan every year that complies with federal OMB guidelines and regulations. And this is to ensure that the county's general fund doesn't subsidize the overhead costs of non-general fund departments, so that all of the funds and all of the programs pay their share for the cost of overhead. These costs, they generally increase with the cost of doing business, as does everything that we do. And of course, any program enhancements that we have approved in prior years ultimately get folded into the rate structure and the formulas. So, for example, a couple of years ago, this committee approved establishing some additional capacity for financial management in the finance department. We also established some additional capacity in our human resources department for things like succession planning and accelerating recruitment. Those things were originally supported by an allocation of the general fund, And then as they came online, we have now integrated them into the cost allocation plan so that they're being fully costed out, in part general fund and in part by the other funds from the other departments. But most noteworthy is we really do try to contain the total cost increases of cost allocation. And so the difference between this year's allocation costs and this coming year's allocation costs is less than 0.1%. When you see the budgets, you'll see that in some areas, some departments will experience some significant increases. That's based upon the methodology for the rate structure for the types of costs that we're talking about. Grants management, for example, will have a different effect than, say, facilities and the rent space that we charge for departments. So you'll see some wide variability in the line items as you go through the different departments. But the net overall effect of the cost allocation increases for the entire county is, like I say, less than 0.1%. In closing, I would invite you to take the time to review the highlights from the past year that I've included in my budget message, because these really good things that we've been doing over the course of the past year, that everybody here has been doing, that you all do, isn't really just about spending dollars, but it's about doing the things that county citizens need and expect and require of us. And so while my budget recommendation to you is pretty much asking you to kind of hold a firm and steady course for this coming year, while we address to some things that we have no control over, like PERS, we should not forget that there are many challenges that lie ahead that I think will tax you. That's probably not the best word to use. Will challenge you in terms of how we find the capacity and the capabilities to be able to address them. We know that there are issues in Clackamas County associated with affordable housing and houselessness. We know we have issues with building new capacity for transportation systems and maintaining what we have. We know that we need new infrastructure in place to treat and clean our urban wastewater so that it is returned to being clean water. We know that we have challenges related to flooding in areas and managing our urban surface water system. We also know we have challenges in continuing to promote true economic opportunity for our citizens and good paying jobs to everyone in the county that deserves a good paying job. And we also know we have a daunting challenge ahead with our physical plant and facilities. We have that we have been working for the need to replace an aging and dilapidated old courthouse, which isn't currently of size and capability to meet our current justice system needs. And we are working with a state program to help put together a package to be able to build a new courthouse up here at Red Soils. But the price tag is a daunting one, and one where we may be asking for additional help from our county citizens. We also know that what lies ahead is a new juvenile facility, a new jail. We're interested in an upgraded new facility to meet the demands and needs of survivors of domestic violence. There's a whole host of things out there related to our physical plant that demand attention as well. And as I think about all of these challenges, and I realize that, well, I've provided for you what is, I think, a simple, stable, and common sense budget, to address these things would require much more in the way of capacity and capability. So with that, I want to thank Laurel Buttman, Mark Gonzalez, Diane Padilla, Roxanne Fisher, and Jin Zhan for the outstanding work they've done in putting these materials together for you. And I'm looking forward to a very productive and enjoyable set of budget review and deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, County Administrator Krupp, for your comments and introductions, and for county staff as well for their work in preparing this budget. In the spirit of our time, I want to just offer some brief comment opportunities for people to share. We'll start with Commissioner Bernard, then Eric and Commissioner Savas.
So, I have a couple of questions. Couple of questions and then a comment. Historically, how often have we accessed the contingency and by what percentage over the past 3 years since you've been here?
Well, last year was the first year that I had proposed actually dipping into something less than the 5%. And I can't recall the exact percentage. It was like 4.5%. We reduced it. And we did the same thing with the reserves, dropped to about 9.5%. And that enabled us to afford paying for a couple of policy level proposals, as well as putting the 700,000 that we're now returning of general fund money into the PERS reserve.
Secondly, fund balance depletion. You said that a number of departments' fund balances have been depleted. Are they restored in this budget? If not, will those balances continue to decline? Much like you mentioned in other policies, it gets harder. The bigger the hole, is the hole getting bigger?
Yeah, so with this budget, they are all submitting balanced budgets for you this year. But I am concerned about how we plan for the future, and each one of the departments involved may have a different kind of strategy that needs to be undertaken. I'm particularly concerned about what we may need to be doing with our disaster management program, particularly given the Homeland Security funding that we had relied on is not really the same as it always has been, and certainly the costs of being able to do that have continued to increase. It's a critical function to the county, and coming up with a means and mechanism for how we go about providing what would be sustained funding at a reliable level is going to take some work.
So finally, and this is not a question, this is more of a comment. During the BCC retreat, Board of County Commissioner retreat, we made an effort to look at a map, which I asked that maybe we have for this budget committee at one point, that focuses on areas of greatest need. And I think it's important that over, the last few decades, we have invested heavily in some communities and a lot less in others. And so the BCC, using that map, has determined that we're going to try and focus where the areas are in greatest need. And one of the programs which you are funding is $250,000 in a grant program. It is 250, right? It's not 5. I'm trying to get that to $1 million someday. A grant program that will be using that map to focus our investments. And as we go around the county, we see folks like out in Colton, Molalla, North Clackamas County that have a lot of poverty, a lot of hunger, and those are the areas I think that we need to, we as a board decided was the most important areas that we should invest. So that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, go ahead next, and then Commissioner Savas.
First of all, I'd like to precede my comments and questions to the group because I ask a lot of questions and I have a lot of information. What I'm trying to do is also obtain information as well as offer suggestions for improvement of the budget document. So please don't take those as a criticism because I think Diane Padilla and the staff and Don Krupp's staff have done a tremendous job in putting this together. This is a daunting task. So with that, I will begin, and I'm going to be just addressing the budget message at this point. In the budget message, you indicate that the unemployment rate was 4.7%, or excuse me, 3.5%. However, in the city's or the county's CAFR, it reports that the unemployment rate is 4.7%. So I'm not sure whether or not we're looking at the same fiscal year, calendar year type statistic. So that's one question. Also, you, in some of your indicators of economic growth or economic vitality, my question is, wouldn't personal and per capita income from the CAFR be a better measure of economic health versus the median home sales price? Because it's directly related to how the citizens can afford whatever their, our cost of living here. And a general comment, I noticed that a lot of the general fund, totally supported by the general fund, a lot of divisions and departments, also end with a reserve for future expenditures and a contingency level that's built into the budget. And my question is why, considering the fact that they're fully supported by the general fund? So in those, when we come to those, I hope that people will take that into account. I guess my question to the chair would be, how much time do I have to ask questions?
Well, there's a good point where we're running behind schedule already, and we want to make our comments, you know, concise and brief. And then if there's
Yeah.
follow-up questions, we could perhaps offer those to respond at a, you know, by staff, you know, through the
Okay.
course of the hearing after
Well, on page 12,
the
you talk,
agenda forward.
you talk about a $2.7 million deduction from general fund reserves to replenish the self-insurance reserve. One of the questions I have is because we're only listing two amounts. One's the contingency and the other is the reserve, general fund reserve. What parcels or parts of that reserve are dedicated to things like PERS or self-insurance or things like that? That's really not clear to me just how much is available to cover costs. And let's see. And one of the things that really concerns me is the fact that, you know, in the self-insurance reserve, you talk about the fees in the budget message. $32 per employee per month is the current rate. It's going to go to $74 per month per employee for the first 6 months of this next fiscal year. And then the year after that, it's $100 per employee per month, just for each employee for self-insurance of liabilities. And my question is the fee applicable to all departments and county agencies or just the general fund agencies? And what is the primary driver of the claims, the cost? For example, we paid over $28 million in 2016 for self-insurance claims, liability claims. And at what level should this reserve be maintained at? And how does this program compare to other jurisdictions with self-insurance programs? Are we funding way too much, paying way too much for self-insurance? And then the cost allocation table you have on, I believe it's page 12. Are these all of the departments and divisions, or are these just the general fund departments and divisions? For example, the assessor has a cost allocation amount in their budget, but yet they're not listed in the table. And so that was one of the big questions I had is, what's the total cost that are being allocated, not just the general fund portion? Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Krupp, do you want to address those at this moment, or have an
What I would
opportunity
suggest
to
is,
look
number one,
at?
I'll go check on the question about the data in the CAFR. I don't know what drives the difference in the employment rate there, but I'll take a look at that and we'll come back to you with an answer on that.
It's page 213 in the CAFR.
And the other issue with regard to the variables we include in the budget message, I'm certainly happy to entertain other types of measures that the Budget Committee would like to be able to see in future budget messages. So happy to get that kind of feedback. With regard to contingency and reserve, the only area that we have identified this guarantee is in the general fund reserve, which is budgeted at about, I think, 13.7 million in the general fund reserve, reserved and dedicated 2.6 million of that as serving as a backup guarantee for the Benefits Administration Program. Now, when you look at the budget itself for Benefits Administration, you'll see that there's actually, I think, a $2.1 million contingency there. And should there actually be a demand or need to reach further than that, we would actually not be tapping into the reserve. That would stay there. It wouldn't be spent during the course of the budget year, but we would be coming to the Board of County Commissioners to tap the 5% contingency in the general fund, which is budgeted at about $8.5 million. I am not expecting that we will be doing that during the course of the coming year, given the plan the staff have put together. But I do look forward to having our HR staff talk with you in more detail about the Benefits Administration Program, a little bit of the history there, so you know what drove the past rates and what's driving what I would agree with you is a dramatic change in the rate structure for the coming year. On the cost allocation.
Well, it's primarily in self-insurance.
Yes, yes. But on the cost allocation chart, what you're seeing there are only those departments that actually charge out to departments a charge for providing services to those departments. And these services are then provided to virtually all county offices and departments that you'll see budget in line items, expenditure line items in each of their respective budgets. So the reason you don't see the assessor here is because the assessor is on the paying end. These are the folks who are identifying what the charging end is, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Okay, I'll be as brief as I can here. I just want to speak to the big picture here a little bit, just talk about who we are. And while I understand that, of course, we're required to balance our budget, and we are balancing our budget by what's presented here, that, you know, the goal of the county, you know, or the goals or some of the, ought to be, you know, to be the health, to further our goals. We ought to have the ability, the means to further the goals of the county, whatever we determine them to be as county commissioners. I remember in my first week as being a county commissioner in 2011, the big storm at the mountain, and suddenly we were faced with a $10 million+ Lolo Pass bridge blowout. And we had reserves to do that. Somewhat reserves. We counted on actually reserves within DTD and others, but you know, at that time we didn't have a reserves or contingency policy, and we've implemented that since then. So I'm grateful for that. But it seems to me that we ought to have some percentage, whether it's, let me say 1% of our budget, whether it's general fund budget or whatever it may be, that we have dedicated to our annual column policy level proposals, or moving the ball, but moving the needle, so to speak, and what we're trying to accomplish as a commission. So the fact that we, you know, it's a pretty flat budget, we don't really have that ability. It'd be nice to know that we could be able to do that and maybe talk about dedicating that. I know staff spent a lot of time assembling the budget, and on the premise of basically meeting the mandatory cost increases regard to PERS and all the other employee cost. I only have really two questions to ask, and I don't need answers now, but I'd like to know on your one thing about 0.1% on the allocated cost, if that's based on a 1-year look back, or is that based on a 5-year look back, or a 5-year average, or is that just looking back 1 year?
Just 1 year,
Okay.
it's looking back.
So I'll cross that out. And then my other one is, I'd like to know what the total increases to the budget, all the budget lines are, minus the mandatory employee cost. Now, you mentioned that you made a couple changes. You mentioned there's some FTE ads here. I don't know what, but I just like to know what the delta is between what is absolutely mandatory versus what was the discretion of the administrator, as you outlined those in your budget message. And lastly, my closing comment is about the economic health of, and I think to Eric's point, actually a little bit, when Eric talked about looking at the CAFR regarding economic health is the average value net worth of a home in Clackamas County being up $100,000. I think that's probably good for the assessor's office. I mean, not the assessor himself, but for us, the economic health of the county, knowing that our values aren't going down and the tax base is there. I think that's all good. But that also really leads to the affordability crisis that we're all facing. And I know I was really pleased that in our retreat that our commission was unified in our concern about the health of our not so privileged and our homeless and houseless folks. And I think that is a number that is really hard to get our arms around. For example, when you were speaking earlier about the TAMF needs are less, maybe a little bit more in Clackamas County. I do know that the nonprofits, their need for food and the number of people they're feeding is up significantly. We certainly know that the homeless count is up significantly. And as I mentioned, when I got here in 2011, we were in the midst of a recession, as well as the Lolo Pass event. So it was daunting. And we were looking at -5, -10 potentials in the budget. But knowing that we really don't have the room, call it that, or the discretionary funds, and the strain as you look forward, to me, we ought to take into account, can't do that today, can't probably even do that this week or next. But I think that these budgets tend to be, my observation is we tend to be maintaining and caretaking, so to speak, as best we can versus actually trying to advance our initiatives. And I think that is something that is more of a board responsibility to say, here's what we want to do, here's where we want to go, and have more of an outcome-based budget. I know that some of my colleagues have talked about, at least one of them still here, talked about a zero-based budgeting that would perhaps accomplish something like that. That's something, again, we can't do this week or next, but if we're actually going to move the ball and advance the county and whatever that initiative is, we need to have the means to do that, and without having not even 1%. 1% of $1 million, of $100 million is $1 million. And we have 781, that's 7.8 million. We don't even have 1/10 of 1% of discretionary money this time. So that ought to be a sign.
Any final thoughts? Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Thanks. I couldn't tell if you saw me.
Go ahead.
I did want to point out that in terms of changes in object categories of expenditures, Diane worked over the weekend to produce this voluminous document, which you probably set aside already, but it is in order of the hearings that are coming up, and it does talk to major changes. There are changes over 15%, because that's what we agreed to ask for 2 weeks ago. But this should be helpful as we go through. And in terms of ability to identify programs for other purposes, I mean, all the money's in here. It's the revenue spent, but it doesn't mean you have to spend it on these things. And part of Performance Clackamas is to find out the programs that are performing. And those are the key performance measurements. Not everyone's on it, but most people are. So, I mean, that's the money that we all have to reallocate if we want to do it.